So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged, and again, like I said in the previous video, I'm only going to be doing stuff that is either previews for the new patch, or when the new patch comes out, of course, I will be starting to do the faction overviews. But for now, of course, this is still in the sort of the late testing phase, as it were, and obviously I've got a couple of 1v1s that I'm going to show in the same video here, because of course this one is only 8,000 frames long. 1v1s do tend to be faster affairs most of the time than other kinds of battles, particularly on open maps like Dry Lake Bed. So we'll be having a look at the two armies that are sort of amassed before us here, and obviously Rohan we've seen a couple of times before already. But Rohan, you know, they do bear a little bit more closer inspection because they have changed quite considerably with how cavalry has changed, and obviously cavalry is the backbone of their army, but also their infantry has changed pretty significantly as well. And obviously Guro-Chan is going to be playing as Rohan, the man himself, one of the two overlords of the Discord. And now we'll have a look at his army first before moving on to his opponent and revealing who they are. So first of all, we have his sort of front line, the Edera Spearmen. If we get a closer look at these guys, it's the renamed variant of the Dismounted Royal Guard. So they're the slightly heavier variant of spearmen that Rohan have available to them, and spears are much more important in the new patch, of course, particularly to Rohan, who of course have got no pikemen available to them. And as I'm sure you've seen already, the Westfold Marshals, the renamed version of the Riddermark Axemen, once again, the sort of high damage shock infantry are going to be important for Rohan's infantry still, because while they have been given some more options with regards to more defensive units, they're still not going to be as good at that as many of the other human factions, and against the Orcs they do run the risk of being overwhelmed, I think. The Hornburg Guard, of course, we saw in that free-for-all that the Hornburg Guard can really pull out a match in the late game with just their survivability. Of course, the strongest of the Rohan infantry units still. And just in behind them, we've got the Westfold Red Shield, still my favourite looking Rohan unit, I have to say. I do like the red and the slightly heavier armour to go with those two-handed axes. And then back here, we have the Riddermark Archers. Lower tier archers in general, I think, should be a little bit more useful in the upcoming patch, so Rohan won't be quite so toothless when it comes to the range fight, particularly not with how strong horse archers are going to be getting in an open field like this. But even on foot, these Riddermark Archers should be able to get some sort of work done. And then back here we have some Shield Maidens, of course, the Axe Throwers. They should still, I think, have the ability to keep units around them in the fight, so they should be able to make it so that your front line doesn't break quite so easily, and breaking is going to be something you're going to have to watch out for. His cavalry spread out a little bit. We have the Rohan Bodyguards, which are his general's unit, and then over here we've got the Sons of Yall and the Red Shield, so both of Rohan's sort of more elite cavalry units together. I suppose he's not put his general in the Sons of Yall so that he can more freely use them on the offensive, which is quite wise. And then we have the Red Shields, of course, should be very useful at range, but they do need to be careful. Obviously, horse archers, even a very elite unit of horse archers like the Red Shields, can be a little bit more vulnerable to being focused down, so you do need to keep them on the move. But as a single unit, they can be very, very potent, I've seen so far. And then over here we've got a couple more units of Riddermark Horse Archers, slightly lower tier, slightly more expendable, but still quite deadly. Horse Archers in general, they are going to be quite vulnerable, like sort of to be shot at from sort of foot archers, for example. But they do have more ammunition than foot archers, which I think is kind of the trade-off that you make. And then we'll have a look at his opponent over here, which is WK, who is playing as the Orcs of Gundabad. So Gundabad, I think, is going to be worthwhile to see how they perform here, because Gundabad in the previous patch were of course very, very strong to the point of being overpowered with their rush, whereas now obviously hopefully some of their teeth have been removed a little bit, and we can see Gundabad be a much more balanced faction, because people would always judge you a little bit when you played Gundabad simply because they were so strong. So now we have the Gundabad Guard, obviously the higher tier spears of Gundabad. You know, they, as Orc spears, they still are going to be falling behind a little bit in terms of quality to like your equivalent Elven units, but they do give a more solid sort of centre to your line than, say, Mordor have available to them, which is always nice. He's got a full complement here, it seems, of Orc Marauders. Orc Marauders, of course, I don't think they're AP anymore. I think, you know, everything has sort of been standardised across the Orc infantry more or less, with a few sort of differences here and there. But the Orc Marauders are still going to be sort of the cheap main line that you will be fielding as the Orcs of Gundabad. At the front here he's got a solitary unit of Orc Fellas, which are likely going to get shredded by archers almost immediately. We have a look here. Nope, that's going to be it. So all of his Orc Marauders are in sort of loose formation. He has got the Walk Skirmishers over here, so I was wrong. They do share this with the Misty Mountains. But yeah, the Walk Skirmishers obviously going to be very important for dealing with those Rohan cavalry units. The Walks in general will be, because obviously, you know, the Orcs are going to be quite vulnerable to those horse archers all over, especially Gundabad, because they don't have the strongest ranged contingent. We shall see. Then we've got a couple of units of Guardians of Khan Doom, and actually I will zoom in on these guys because you can see they have been given a sort of unit model upgrade. They've been made a little bit more detailed. and their armour's been given this sort of rusted effect to sort of signify the fact that Angmar has not been a sort of functional kingdom for some time, and they are but a memory. And this is true, I think, for all of the Witch Realm units. You can see even the Witch Realm Hammer Guard have got that rusted effect. They've got rusty warhammers, but they are still, of course, very, very high-tier shock troops, and they will be very, very good at dealing with those armoured units. But of course, Rohan not so reliant on their armour. And then we've got the sort of the new model for the Witch Realm Blackguard. They've been made a little bit more detailed as well. You can see that the helms have been made to be a bit more reminiscent of the Witch King himself. The shields have been made a little bit more detailed, the armour as well. And obviously, it goes without saying that the Witch Realm Blackguard is still going to be Gundabad's most elite unit. And then over here we have I think these guys are still going to have their unit model tweaked a little bit, but we have the troll swords, which I think are going to be the strongest troll unit in the game, simply because they have the most defense with this large shield. And they are able to sort of, again, they have these like very large swords as well. I think they're stronger than the Olak High and the trolls of the White Hand. And it does fit with how aggressive Gundabad are meant to be. And then over here I think he's got another unit of Gundabad Guard. So without further ado, let us begin. So I would imagine, based on his army composition, that WK is going to very quickly move into action here. You can just see that his archers did appear, so he did have hidden units, of course. He's got Barrow Wights, and he's got, I think he's got some archers as well. He's got some Snaga Stalkers, which are, again, are lower tier units. He's also got these Orc Fellas. Again, the Barrow Wights are an interesting unit that I do want to see in action as well, because they are, of course, the ultimate tar pit unit, which, again, for Gundabad in particular, could be very useful, because it means that you're not going to be able to deal with even their lower tier units, and then they can get some shenanigans going on with their higher tier units. But again, there is only one unit of them. And also, the biggest problem that I do think Gundabad will have are going to be these Horse Archers in this matchup. Horse Archers in general have been made a lot stronger, and of every faction in the game, I would say Gundabad probably has the least answer to Horse Archers. Again, Wargs are quite vulnerable to Horse Archers, simply because they can be skirmished to death from a distance, and the Javelin variant of the Wargs are not going to be able to get into range before the Horse Archers can deal their damage to them. So of course the Riddermark Horse Archer is just going to harass the Gundabad army as it approaches, picking and choosing its targets. We have the elite cavalry going off over there, and we can see actually that some Gundabad Guard is peeling off to go and deal with them. Obviously some of the Gundabad units, stuff like the elites, the Guardians of Khan Doom, the Gundabad Guard, even though they're not quite as powerful as once they were, they are still going to be far more durable to this sort of thing. And obviously you can see the Riddermark Horse Archers getting dangerously close to the Snaga. And of course the Gundabad army is just going to be advancing. You can see that the red shield's going in through here, sort of bisecting the Gundabad Guard, going in between them. Some of the Gundabad Guard are falling to the fire of the red shields, of course. Very elite Horse Archer units, sort of on the same sort of tier as the Brotherhood of the Bow. So obviously they're going to be very, very effective at what they do. As we move in here, the Gundabad army is going to collide with the Rohan lines. And Rohan, how they use their cavalry here is going to be pretty key. I do think that the Horse Archers mean that Rohan should be okay. But again, it's going to be interesting to see how Rohan's infantry stands up, because Westfold Marshals, as shock infantry, they aren't going to be the most durable, and they're not going to get their charge off here, it seems. They're just going to sort of stay in line, which is not really the sort of thing that shock infantry is best at. Again, they're also taking a bit of friendly fire from the rather inaccurate Riddermark Archers. Well, if we go back over here, you can see the Troll Swords menacing the Rohan cavalry, forcing them to sort of keep their distance. The Riddermark Horse Archers charging in. I'm surprised. I don't think they've got their ammunition, but again, micro-intensive, this was likely a bit more of a mistake than anything else. But even so, the Orc Marauders are not going to be the unit to really take the most advantage of that sort of thing. You can see on the other side the Rohan bodyguards making life a little bit more miserable over there. You can actually see at the back the Warg Skirmishers are sort of all alone with the Sons of Yore, which is exactly where the Warg Skirmishers want to be, because it means they're going to be able to do some nice range damage to the most elite Rohan cavalry unit without being sort of targeted down by the red shields. Again, the Warg Skirmishers of all of Gundabad's units here would probably be the thing I'd want to focus down with my Horse Archers the most. Because again, the Troll Swords are another sort of target, high priority target, but they're likely going to be able to weather the Archer Storm a lot better. You can see over here that the elites of Gundabad are going to be able to carve through these Edoras spearmen pretty quickly, so the elites of Rohan are going to be needed to keep this line intact over here. Of course, Gundabad is still going to be a rush-centric faction, so this is exactly the sort of thing you can expect from Gundabad. Very robust assault, going to be very thick with Orcs. In places that's going to be weaker than others. Obviously, the Snaga Stalkers and the Orc Marauders are not going to be able to deal with these Westfold Marshals and the Hornburg Guard. But obviously the elites are concentrated in that one section of line, which is going to... Oh, hello, you can see the the Shield Maiden's able to get some volleys off into these Orc Marauders. Axe throwers, of course, have got really venomous ammunition, as we've seen previously from the Trollshaw axe throwers in that that team battle on this very map. They're capable of carving down even very strong units. Meanwhile, these Edera Spearmen, it looks like they were trying to flank around, but they have been intercepted by these Guardians of Khan Dum. And the Guardians of Khan Dum, of course, as melee infantry, are going to have the beating of sort of simple Edera Spearmen. These Hammer and Anvil charges are still going on, which is leading to most of Gundabad's line breaking. A lot of these Orc Marauders and Snaga have been sort of dispersed. These Barrow Wights are still alive, but you can see the only place where Gundabad are really winning at this point are the area where they concentrated their sort of more elite units. You can see the Gundabad Guard are sort of coming back. There are Orc Fellas back here. The Troll Swords also coming forward. Again, the Troll Swords are very strong, and they should be able to get some kills on these Hornburg Guard. But I would still suggest that the Trolls are probably going to find themselves... Well, they do have these Barrow Wights sort of kind of supporting them. But it'll be interesting to see how these Troll Swords hold up to these very elite Rohan sort of heavy infantry units. The Red Shields are still running around, and the Rohan bodyguards. So you can see, I think the Rohan cavalry is probably going to be enough to pull this out. Even if the Horse Archers start to run out of ammunition, they do still have a lot of this. Actually, the Red Shields going in here to the Troll Swords, not exactly the kind of fight they want. They got cut to bits by the Trolls in melee. Again, if you're going to go into melee with Trolls with cavalry, you really want to choose a cavalry with high charge damage so that you can kill the Trolls in one fell swoop. Horse Archers' charge damage is not very good at all. The Rohan bodyguards is significantly better, so let's see if this is any different from the last patch. You can see some of the Trolls did fall from the charge, which is the sort of the key difference between shock cavalry and Horse Archers. Horse Archers have got a terrible charge bonus. Having said that, they are still charging in, making life a little bit more difficult for Gundabad's infantry. When they are out of ammunition, after all, there is little else you can do with them. Don't know where the Sons of Yore have gone. Maybe the Warg Skirmishers killed them all. You can see that the Gundabad line is really starting to struggle to hold itself together. The Troll Swords are doing their best. The Riddermark Archers back here have been firing away for quite some time now. The Westfold Red Shields back here, really making life difficult for the Rohan infantry on this side. Again, the Guardians of Khan Dum were the only higher tier unit that Gundabad had over here. And again, they're not going to find themselves in a good place against the Red Shields. The Red Shields are, the Guardians of Khan Dum are exactly the kind of unit that Westfold Red Shields are going to like to fight against. All of that armour, going to be able to deal a lot of damage, and again, they also have the Shield Maidens in melee with them, so it's not like they're going to be in danger of breaking anytime soon. The Edera Spearmen are still alive, but only just. You can see the Hornburg Guard is still alive after the Trolls sort of left the vicinity. And the Barrow Wights are over here, but again, Gundabad don't really need a tar pit at this point. They need some high damage units to really try and sort of... Well, you could say that they do have quite a lot of these... Well, there goes the Gundabad General, as I say that, at the hands of the Shield Maidens. They do still have quite a high concentration of elite units over here. They've got the Guardians of Khan Dum. I do still think they've got some Gundabad Guard, but the Hammer Guard have sort of fallen by the wayside a little bit more. And the Troll Shields. The problem that I do think they're going to have here is they don't have enough left, and again, I do think that the breakage of that Rohan line, the breakage of the Gundabad line when it received those Hammer and Anvil charges from the Rohan bodyguard was probably what decided this fight. I mean, the Warg Skirmishers are still alive, but again, they're going to find themselves in melee against the Westfold Red Shields, and of course, Wargs don't have very much staying power, especially not the Skirmisher variant, so these guys are going to find themselves cut down very, very quickly. And again, the Horse Archers, they made life difficult for Gundabad, which is, again, one of the deciding factors of this match, I would say. Simply because Gundabad didn't really have the answers, and I do still think that against one of the Horse Archer focused factions in the new patch, you're going to need to bring some sort of ranged presence to sort of keep them at arm's length. And even if it's just going to be sort of Goblin Trackers, which are the best archer that Gundabad can field, you're going to need to have them around the place, because that is still going to be a high volume of archer fire that's going to be going in to the Horse Archers, and it's just going to sort of prevent the Horse Archers from having it all their own way. And then obviously the other thing is, Gundabad were able to sort of buckle the Rohan line in one place. Oh, there are the Sons of Yore, they're not fully dead. But I do still think that, they probably would have been better served spreading out their elites a little bit more so their line held together. Because when their line buckled, Rohan had quite a lot of spare units they could use. The Barrow Wights are back here. The Banter Force is evenly matched. Well, I say that. Defeat is a distinct possibility now. Again, I don't think these guys have got a particularly high sort of combat stats at all. It's really just survivability that they bring to the table. They are, they are in melee against Riddermark archers, of course, though. So it's, again, wet noodles slapping against one another, not really doing a great deal of damage. But even so, this isn't really serving a great deal of purpose for either side. The Riddermark archers have already done the damage that they sought to do in this battle, I would suggest. These Riddermark archers are in melee against these Gundabad Guard. The Gundabad Guard will probably beat the Riddermark archers, even though victory seems certain. Well, there's a lot of Riddermark archers here. And also they're about to receive hammer and anvil charges from the Rohan heavy cavalry. Even though they're spearmen at this point, yeah, they're routing and broken. Orcs, of course, the morale is going to be a problem. These Riddermark archers over here sort of reforming, yeah. Rohan at this point have the beating of Gundabad. The Westfold Red Shield's still very much alive. I think these Barrow Wights are the only thing that's left on the field, so they did weather the storm better than their Patriots. Again, the Trolls were never going to be able to sort of draw out the battle all on their lonesome, and there are only 4 which are on Hammer Guard at this point, and they've drawn the attention of the Sons of Yore. Those Red Shields are just sort of hanging out. Hornberg Guard, of course, so Rohan able to use their cavalry very, very efficiently. Because cavalry is not as powerful as it once was, so there were dangers to the cavalry units here, the Gundabad Guard in particular, and the Warg Skirmishers, but ultimately it was the Horse Archers, I think, which made life difficult for the Gundabad infantry. And then, of course, the way the Gundabad infantry folded in the middle, where those cavalry charges happened, was pretty terminal. So that was Gundabad attempting a rush, and it did kind of work in places, but you can see that it is not quite as powerful as it once was. And if you sort of build your army wrong, I would suggest, it's going to be sort of building your army to face your opponent is going to be much more important in the current patch, because different builds are going to work against different factions much more. It's not going to be a case of trying to sort of build against the cavalry sort of heavy army, or trying to sort of avoid those archer focused armies like the Woodland Realms would often feel. Yeah, I will say that a couple of the things that were told to me before this were that the Horse Archers, they do have, the accuracy on them is a bit too high at the moment, so you can expect them to not be quite as deadly as this when the patch comes out, but even so, Horse Archers are still going to be much more effective than once they were. And also something else is I think that Gundabad's lower tiers are going to be sort of made a little bit stronger. I think in particular stuff like the Orc Fellas are going to be made a little bit more potent, because it does go with the fact that Gundabad are still a rush faction. It's not going to be as strong as their previous rush, of course, but it is still going to be what holds the primary focus of their faction. Sort of the main strategy, as it were. I'm not sure if Gundabad have got anything left as ever a spearman. Regardless, we'll just bump this up to ×2. Actually, they do still have those. There's one Barrow Wight, and he's going to die. So yeah, there is going to be another battle, the same matchup as well. I think the players sort of swapped factions at this point, so yes, Kuro managing to win that one. But yeah, we'll go into the next fight, but just bearing in mind that the Horse Archers will not be quite this powerful because of the accuracy. They do have the same accuracy as Ranger units, which have got the highest accuracy in the game in the next patch coming up. So they will be reduced a little bit, because of course it's going to be a little bit more difficult to fire accurately from horseback than it is from a planted position, so it makes sense. And Gundabad, I think their lower tiers are going to be buffed a little bit more, so that their rush is a little bit more survivable, because obviously here it crumbled when it received those hammer and anvil charges, which again would be more avoided if the elites were spread out along the line, but it wouldn't have made Gundabad's rush any more effective, I don't think. It still would have ended up losing in the long run. So now we'll move on to the second battle and see how that works out. So for round 2, and this time Kuro is playing as the Orcs of Gundabad, and based on a cursory look over his army, it looks like he's done exactly, well, a very similar thing to WK in that he's brought no archers at all, which against Rohan and their Horse Archers, as the build currently works, I don't think is going to work out too well, but we'll see. It's the same sort of frame length as the previous battle. He's got some Snaga Stalkers again as some chaff. He's got some Gundabad Guard for spears against a cavalry focused faction. I would suggest you really kind of need to bring them. We also have these Guardians of Khan Doom at the front. Again, they're still going to be the workhorse of the Gundabad army, still going to be holding the line together with how tough they are. Again, I think he's got 3 units of them, because, actually no, is this 2 units? No, yeah, it is 2 units, but again, they're not quite as strong as they once were, but they are sort of intended to be the sort of centre point to Gundabad's line, I think, now. We also have the Barrow Wights, of course, said before what they are. Trolls of Gundabad, so not quite investing as much in his trolls this time around. The Witch-Realm Blackguard, we never even saw them in battle last time. They must have got peppered down by those red shields and the Riddermark Horse Archers before they ever got close. He's also got a couple of units of Scourge Raiders, which is bold considering that they are weak against ranged fire, and Rohan with their Horse Archers are clearly going to bring a lot of ranged. He's got some Orc Marauders here in the middle as sort of numbers for his army. He's also got the Blackwatch Legion, which are now a Gundabad unit, of course. They're going to be... They do fit Gundabad's philosophy a little bit more than the Misty Mountains. I can't help feel as though that the Misty Mountains have kind of drawn the short straw by losing them, though. We'll see if the Misty Mountains get sort of... We'll see what the Misty Mountains can do in terms of a 1v1 to see how they've replaced the Blackwatch Legion, but I'm not quite sure what that would be. The Arm Inquisitors are a unit which Kuro has brought, which is interesting. Again, they will stand up to sort of the Horse Archer fire better than the Wargs, but they will still be kited to death if they are, like they chase the Horse Archers. They will at least manage to sort of stand up to something like the Sons of Yorl in melee a little bit better, and he also has the Witch-Realm Hammer Guard in here as well. So it's an interesting sort of thing. Again, he's going to have to sort of charge forward very, very quickly to sort of get the most out of his army, but I can't help but feel as though that will play into Rohan's hands a bit. We'll have a look at what WK has done with his army, and he has got some Eastfold Spearmen, which again are the renamed dismounted Aerid Lancers. Not quite as strong as the Edoras Spearmen, but he has got considerably more of them. And this is a sort of more together front line than the Westfold Marshals. I think that, again, this is sort of designed to be more of a stalling measure. They're not going to get too many kills against the elites of Gundabad. He's also got some Riddermark Spears over here, which are the, of course, even lower tier Spearmen. So again, this is going to be sort of the front line. And then over here we have the Westfold Marshals and the Westfold Red Shield. So here we have the damage, and they're in behind the spears, so they're going to charge in after the line is engaged, I imagine. And then over here we have the Edoras Infantry, so it'll be interesting to see how these guys perform, of course, because they are the sort of more mainline heavy infantry unit. So again, think Gondor Infantry or Dol Amroth Men-at-Arms. I think the Edoras Infantry is intended to be on that sort of level, which will give Rohan a more solid infantry corps if you decide to build your army in that way. In particular in siege battles, I think that's going to come in handy for them. Westfold Marshals and Red Shields again, and then over here I can assume we have the cavalry. We also have some Riddermark archers, so he's got his archers off over on the side. He's also got some Westfold Marshals over here to protect them in melee, I assume. He's got some civilians, which is amusing. And then he's got some Rohan nobles, he's got some Rohan bodyguards, and he's got some more Rohan nobles. So he actually doesn't have any horse archers, so this could actually work out much better for Gundabad this time around. I think WK wants to go for a little bit more of an infantry-focused army, which is bold against Gundabad, especially for Rohan. We'll see. This will be a good litmus test of just how good Rohan's infantry is now, if it's capable of standing up to a Gundabad rush, which is the primary focus of Gundabad, of course, as I've said. If it is able to weather that storm, then one of two things is possible. Either Rohan's infantry is now capable, or Gundabad is just not as good as it should be, which is a dramatic turnaround from the previous patch if true. But again, we can see that WK has split his army somewhat, so this army over here with the spearmen at the front does run the risk of being overwhelmed a little bit, which is why I think he's pulled back to give himself a little bit more time for his other army to get into position. And of course the Riddermark archers will still be able to pick and choose their targets. Again, the Witch-Realm Inquisitors are also sort of probing. Actually no, those are Eastfold Scouts, so that was something that I did miss, because that is a unit that is potentially able to hide. Of course they are very, very low tier cavalry. Any cavalry unit that can hide is either really expensive or really low tier, but he is able to kill the Gundabad general in one charge, assassinated. That is very interesting. So again, shock cavalry is able to get decent charge damage off regardless of what tier it is, and he was able to sneak in and get a charge on the Witch-Realm Blackguard. I can't help but feel that is a little bit strange. But yeah, the Eastfold Scouts able to assassinate the Gundabad general. That must be really annoying for Kuro. You can see that his army is still charging forth to meet the Rohan front line, which Arm Inquisitors sort of guarding against the Rohan cavalry from the rear. And the archers, of course, getting into position. Of course, the Eastfold Scouts are not going to have the greatest amount of staying power of any cavalry in the world, so they should start to fall apart pretty quickly. They are still fresh, though, and steady. That was odd. I can't help but feel as though the Witch-Realm Blackguard should be able to stand up to a charge a little bit better than that. I mean, I would understand if it was a higher tier cavalry, but Eastfold Scouts are the lowest cavalry Rohan have available to them. That's a little bit strange. You can see that parts of the Gundabad line have now engaged against the Eastfold Spears. This is kind of exactly what Rohan wants to happen. Gundabad to engage them head on, and they just need to hope that their spearmen can sort of stand up to the storm that Gundabad is bringing down upon them. The Edoras infantry sort of preventing the flank, these Orc Marauders getting into battle as well. The Edoras infantry will need a little bit of support against this level of Orcs, but he does have those Westfold Red Shields and Marshals in reserve, of course. And we can see that the Blackwatch Legion are sort of trying to do the same on the other side, but immediately the Red Shields coming into battle against them, and the Edoras infantry able to sort of flank around them. You can see over here that the Rohan nobles being engaged by the Gundabad Guard. That's bad news for them, they need to get out of there. The Gundabad Guard as spears should be able to do a decent amount of damage to the Rohan nobles. You can actually see over here though that the rear charge is going to happen almost immediately. Defeat is almost a certainty for the Blackwatch Legion under the pressure of the Rohan nobles and the Axemen, so they are completely surrounded and the Blackwatch Legion being cut down. And again, I don't think that Gundabad are going to be able to make too many inroads against this very thick Rohan front line. You can see the Guardians of Kharndoom, it is evenly matched, despite the fact that Rohan have considerably more men here. Gundabad's quality is greater on this front line. But Gundabad are not going to be able to sort of smash through these spears as quickly as they need to be able to in order to win this fight. The Riddermark spears are not going to be able to hold out long against this level of Orcs. The Witchround Blackguard, I mean, we will be able to see them in battle, albeit without the general in the unit. The Barrow Wights are also coming around here, and the Scourge Raiders, so Gundabad sort of focusing on this front. You can see the Trolls over here also getting into these Westfold Marshals, and the Westfold Marshals are going to fall before this level of pressure. See the Edoras infantry back here with the red shields. The Witchround Blackguard, they'll be able to beat the Edoras infantry, of course, in melee pretty easily, but I can't help but feel as though if those red shields get into combat in the rear of the Blackguard, they will take a prohibitive number of losses. The Barrow Wights are sort of all over the place. The unit is still relatively intact. You can see the front line is still kind of unmoving. And over here you can see the Blackwatch Legion is still alive, so they were able to weather that storm quite effectively, but they are still going to lose that fight ultimately. The Rohan nobles running around, it looks like they're going to try and get a charge off on these Scourge Raiders. Again, the charge of cavalry, shock cavalry, is going to be very effective, of course. But they do need to get out of melee pretty quickly. I mean, that is a nice charge, getting a nice amount of kills on those Scourge Raiders. But they do need to be careful, because as soon as the sustained melee starts, shock cavalry starts to lose a great amount of its effectiveness. Some of the Eastfold Spearmen is routing, however, so sort of you can see that the rear charge into the spears of the Scourge Raiders and the Barrow Wights has caused the Rohan line to buckle a little bit. But very quickly, these Westfold Marshals and the Edoras infantry is over here to sort of plug the gap. However, the Guardians of Kharndoom, so Gundabad ultimately, the spears were able to hold up Gundabad for a while, but now Gundabad is able to sort of crack through the lines very efficiently. You can see that the Westfold Red Shields, they are in battle, but they are wavering. Again, this is mainly because the Hammer Guard and the Guardians of Kharndoom are here, and suddenly Rohan's sort of fragility is starting to shine through. Gundabad's infantry is very, very deadly at its higher tiers. And again, without those horse archers to pepper down Gundabad on the approach, it looks like Rohan is in a pure infantry fight. Is not going to have the tools to deal with Gundabad, which is right, of course. I mean, Gundabad are an infantry rush-focused faction. You would expect them to be better at dealing with a Rohan build that is focused around this sort of thing, particularly with the spears at the front. You can see these Guardians of Kharndoom are actually shaken. I think that's because they've been taking rear charges from these Rohan nobles, which is bad news for them. Some of the Eastfold Spearmen are still alive. The civilians are charging in. The civilians with their pitchforks and shovels going up against Guardians of Kharndoom. Again, I think Rohan are just going to be glad for numbers at this point, because Gundabad is sort of wrapping around, swamping over them. The cavalry really needs to start getting some charges off very, very quickly. The Westfold Marshals are winning over there against the Blackwatch Legion. The Blackwatch Legion are still fighting though. They may have been losing all this time, but they have at least managed to tie up a great amount of these Rohan Axemen, which could really have been used elsewhere, particularly where the line broke. And you can see that at this point, Gundabad is starting to tighten the noose a little bit. The Edoras infantry doing its best to hold up again. The Barrow Wights are just here to sort of keep the Gundabad assault going. There are still some trolls alive as well, which is good to see that they've got a little bit more staying power than they once had. Meanwhile, you can see that the Riddermark archers firing their fire arrows in, getting a little bit of friendly fire as well. But those Scourge Raiders are routing, of course, and with the sort of added importance of routing, fire arrows might well be useful. And you can see as soon as the fire arrows coming in, that wavering unit of Marauders broke. Those Arm Inquisitors are still looming in the background though, something else Rohan is going to have to deal with. Now the Scourge Raiders are going to be under fire arrow fire here. They are surrounded as well by axemen, but again, these Eastfold spears are not exactly the finest quality unit, and they are actually wavering, probably under their own fire arrows, which could lead to them breaking pretty quickly. All of the units over here are shaken. The Witcherarm Hammer Guard are sort of pursuing, however, with the support of the Guardians of Khan Doom. The Rohan nobles are largely untouched, however, and this is the problem that a Gundabad build like this is going to have. You don't really have anything that can chase down cavalry other than the Arm Inquisitors. The Inquisitors, however, are going after the archers, which again is one of the tools that Rohan is really going to be needing to use here. The fire arrows breaking the goblins, the orc lines. And you can see that the Arm Inquisitors just scything their way through that unit of archers, moving on to the next one. So the archers kind of tied up at the moment, but fortunately for Rohan, they do still have their Rohan nobles. I don't know where their bodyguard went, however. Unless they're both sort of together. But yeah, the Rohan nobles charging in, trying to deal with this Hammer Guard, and the Hammer Guard defeat does seem certain, largely because of the charges, I'm sure. The Witcherarm Blackguard, however, are coming forward. The Eastfold Spearmen are routing, so this over here is sort of Rohan's last bastion of infantry. You can see that the Witcherarm Inquisitors are going to get a rear charge onto these Westfold Marshals, and that is going to be sufficient to break them. So Gundabad were able to sort of do much better this time around, and I can't help but feel as though that is due to the absence of the Rohirrim Horse Archers. Yeah, it looks like Gundabad are going to be able to pull this one out. So the Rohan nobles, defeat seems certain. Again, they don't really have enough in their unit really to make sort of really nice charges actually connect at this point. Some Orc Marauders are sort of returning. And again, at this point, the only thing that's really left for Rohan are their Riddermark Archers, which, needless to say, are not going to be able to do the business in melee against sort of Witcherarm Hammer Guard and Blackguard. At least we got to see the Blackguard this time. They were able to sort of do their job alongside the Hammer Guard, be a really effective heavy infantry unit. Last time, they must have just been focused down by the Horse Archers, because in melee they've been very effective this time around. You can see these Scourge Raiders getting into battle against these Riddermark Archers. And the Witcherarm Inquisitors sort of just, again, scything through this low-tier archer unit. So the added importance in an open field of Horse Archers, I think, has sort of been personified in these two battles, because when Rohan had them, they won pretty comfortably against Gundabad. However, when they tried to go for an infantry fight, Gundabad, of all of the Orc factions, you know, are going to be one of the strongest in terms of the amount of infantry, the amount of good infantry, damaging infantry that they can field. So, you know, again, Rohan, their infantry is better now, but it's still not going to be sort of enough to win the battle all on its own. And I do think, again, that the Eastfold Spears were just not elite enough to deal with the amount of damage that was coming their way from Gundabad. So again, I think that this is kind of an accurate representation of what you can expect from this matchup in both battles. If Rohan go sort of Horse Archer heavy and Cavalry heavy against Gundabad, who are sort of much more elite infantry and sort of mid-tier infantry, much more rush focused, Rohan are probably going to have the advantage there. You know, it's not impossible for Gundabad to win. If you bring some sort of ranged units, those Horse Archers are not going to be quite as effective as they were in the previous battle. Even if it's just Goblin Trackers, you know, Horse Archers are not going to be the most durable units. So it's worth bringing ranged firepower as Gundabad, even if you've got the worst archers in the game against Rohan, simply to try and counteract those Horse Archers, which are, for the most part, inevitably going to come your way. However, if Rohan do go infantry focused, the sort of advantage switches quite heavily in Gundabad's favour, because it's exactly the sort of fight that they want to see. They want to be able to rush into enemy lines and do a lot of damage very, very quickly. And again, the Rohan cavalry was able to get a lot of charges off, and they were able to sort of assassinate the Gundabad general. Perhaps that was more fortune than anything else, because the general was sort of sticking out a little bit, and he took the full force of a shock cavalry's charge. But again, as you can see, Gundabad able to win that fight. Let's have a look at the kills actually and see how Gundabad, again, the Guardians of Khan Doom forming the centre of that line, doing a lot of damage to those Eastfold spears and those Riddermark spears. Just not, you know, those spearmen are not going to be able to deal with the Gundabad infantry effectively enough to sort of make this sort of build effective against Gundabad, I don't think. That sort of having those spears at the front I think will work against some factions, sort of lower tier spears. Against something like the Misty Mountains, where a lot of their infantry is sort of less effective, something like that might be better. But against Gundabad, who have got much more damaging units, it's going to be, you know, much more questionable as to whether that's going to work. The Witch Realm Inquisitors getting the most kills, so again they were able to charge around the battle largely unimpeded by the Rohan cavalry. And again, the Rohan cavalry, I'm sure it got quite a lot of kills as well against a lot of the low tier stuff, but ultimately Gundabad were just able to grind up against Rohan's line and smash it to bits ultimately. Rohan's lower tier spears not able to withstand the Gundabad power. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting sort of couple of fights. Again, I'm sure, as you can tell from the words that I'm choosing, I'm not entirely familiar with how things are going to be working out in the next patch, because again, I'm trying to sort of learn as I go here. But yeah, it would seem that Rohan, against a faction like Gundabad, against a very infantry-heavy faction, you know, Gundabad are probably one of the most infantry-heavy faction in the game. They're very lopsided. The horse archers are going to be all important. If you don't bring those horse archers and you try to go for a more infantry-focused build, you're going to struggle a lot more against the power that Gundabad can bring in melee, because that is still going to be Gundabad's focus. But I also hope that this video showed that Gundabad are not quite the unstoppable powerhouses that they once were. They are capable of being defeated now, quite handily as well, by Rohan in that first battle. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next, which will again be something based on the new patch.